In today's wealth management landscape, affluent and wealthy African families face different sets of challenges as they plan or propose business succession, wealth distribution, and its transfer. As we are experiencing the great wealth transfer from baby boomers and the silent generation, which is currently ongoing, to both the millennials, the Gen Zs, it is important to appreciate existing realities of wealthy African families, where succession planning and wealth distribution has been almost impossible to achieve as a result, amongst others, of cultural, traditional, and native laws impediments. In African cultural context, it is argued that succession planning and wealth distribution is deeply rooted in native traditional values and its social structures. It appears a common reality is that the first male child usually assumes leadership and succeeds the patriarch or matriarch, potentially in conflict with business governance for those that have family businesses, intentional and strategic succession, as well as wealth distribution that could have been envisaged or even put in place by the patriarch or the matriarch. Further to this, in situations where this conflict arises, there is no progress made as beneficiaries of the family estates become embroiled in disputes, escalating conflicts and controversies that in essence tarnishes and makes redundant the legacy and wealth of the family. Our wealth webinar today would look and discuss how successful multi-generational wealth planning by wealthy African families can be achieved within contemporary African traditional laws and settings, as well as what impact, if any, diversity and inclusion, that is female inheritors, and also the rising generation, how they can be empowered and how those roles, when they are empowered, can play in the context of pursuing successful generational wealth for African families. Our conversation points this afternoon would be on cultural dynamics in wealth planning, succession and transfer for wealthy African families. We'll look at the role of traditional and native laws in succession and wealth transfer, family conflict and conflict management practices, the impact of women within traditional values and societal structures, as well as how the rising generation can become stewards of wealth. So once again, thank you for joining us. With us today, we have two wonderful speakers. We have Mr. Nkem Nkpana, as well as Mary Asante Asamoah. They would be discussing and extraying this subject with us. How do we plan for multi-generational wealth within the African socio-cultural system that we have in place? Mr. Nkem Nkpana is joining us today. He's an entrepreneur, a strategist, and business coach dedicated to helping business owners achieve sustainable revenue growth. Through his Amplify coaching program, he equips entrepreneurs and with strategies and financial intelligence to attract high-value clients and double their revenues. Mr. Nkem is a chartered accountant and accredited performance coach. He holds an MBA from Oxford Brookes Business School and is a member of the UK Institute of Enterprise and Entrepreneurs. As an executive director, and he's also the executive director and national trainer at BNI. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Nkem Nkpana with us today. We would also have Mary join us. Mary is joining us from our dear sister country, Ghana. Mary is a second generational family business owner. She's a leader in Ghana's mining industry with over 15 years of experience as an executive director of Batex African Projects Limited. She drives supply chain solutions and industry collaboration. Mary is passionate about family businesses and founded the Family Business Hub. And she also holds the Family Business Diaries podcast. Please check out our podcast. She serves as the vice chair of the Ghanaian Chamber of Mines Affiliate Committee and was named one of Ghana's top 10 inspirational women in mining 2024. She holds an executive MBA from Lancaster University and actively advocates for women and local content in mining. It's our pleasure to have Mary join us today, as well as Mr. Nkem Mpana. Just a recap of the topics that we would be discussing and highlighting. We'll be looking at the role that culture plays. We'll be looking at the role that women plays. We'll be looking at the role that the next generation can play. So Mary and Nkem, thank you for joining us today. I will just go right straight to our conversation. From your experience, I'm going to start with Mary, ladies first. From your experience, just speak to how cultural dynamics that have affected families that you have experienced or you have worked with, or they are also within your center of influence as a family business owner, how those cultural dynamics have impacted them, their families, and their ability to leave legacies and plan their generational wealth. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, fantastic.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much, Mercy, for the invitation. Truly, truly, truly appreciate it. And yeah, I'm actually interested in this conversation and hoping to learn a lot as well, because whether we like it or not, the external factors that affect, sort of influence what we want to do with our wealth, they're real. And yeah, it's important that we discuss it. So I'm glad to be here and to lend my voice to this conversation. I think for me, just listening to this whole thing and talking about cultural dynamics and what happens, I keep thinking, my goodness, you start a business, you're trying to maybe solve a problem and then make some money. And then from there, they talk to you about, okay, you need to have structures in place and you need to leave the business for the next generation. So you start working on that. And then you have to manage the wealth. And then you have to think of the cultural dynamics. You have to think of all the factors that could affect, this thing from happening, from you being able to implement your wishes. It's a complicated web, but this is the life we live. So yes, you just have to be very intentional with what you do. Now, just thinking about culture and the dynamics and, how it affects everything. I've just been thinking of Ghana. I mean, I can only talk from my context and come from a region with 16 regions, different ethnic groups. I think the first thing for us is the matrilineal system that has a major influence on how we do things, our cultural beliefs, who gets what, how we view property or inheritance to begin with is a major thing. And I think when it comes to basically how these cultures come into play, you cannot overlook you cannot overlook all the systems or all the beliefs that your people have just because you're modernized. For instance, you cannot forget that uncle in the village who still knows that you're coming from a patrilineal system or you're from a matrilineal system. So your property is his, things like that. So it's important to identify some of these beliefs, sort of the patrilineal system, role of the extended family, elders and authority. You cannot ignore these things, especially if you want peace of mind and you want to rest in peace, right? You need to make sure that you factor all these things in as you plan. So yes, I think the first thing is to just acknowledge that there are beliefs, there are things that exist. People think people have a different mindset. And as you structure your stuff, ensure that you keep these in mind. So that's a general thing for me.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, like, as you rightly said, yes, there would always be that uncle, there would always be that auntie, there would always be that family member that just, no matter what you say, what are your plans, they would always come and tell you, this is how we do it. And more often than not, you find out that whatever are the intentions or how you can have successful multi-generational families, those things start getting embroiled in conflict and disunity and all that. So it's a reality that we have to speak through. So we are going to speak more about it and how best clients can plan, families can plan their wealth, especially if they envisage a multi-generational future for that wealth for themselves and their family. So we're going to ask the same question to Mr. Nkem and just say, please just give us your own thoughts on the cultural dynamics as you have experienced it. Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Okay, so looking at this from the perspective of business, it can be frightening. Frightening in the sense that as a young man or a young woman, young entrepreneur, you have a crazy idea, about how to transform lives, either through your product or your service. And that's what you're focused on. You want to see how many lives you want to impact, by being in business. You want to see how consistently you would be able to satisfy your customers and to retain them, and turn them around as your evangelists, loyal customers, and be profitable and be successful, and all of those. But little do we realize the impact of tradition or culture, even impacting our businesses. I think many entrepreneurs realize that very lately. And so it becomes frightening that sometimes we do not consider what happens to us when we are not here. And this is where this wealth webinar is very important for me and for some of you today. And so when we are there driving this business, wanting to make profit and all of those, depending on your objective for setting up a business, it's also very important that we consider what happens next when we're not here. And we see that come to play every day, talking in terms of, my own part of the world, coming from the southeastern part of Nigeria, Igbo precisely. We see this male-centric tradition or culture where the eldest in the family gets the largest of everything, and then the suppression of the women folk or the daughters, from getting anything from the family, when it comes to wealth distribution. And so the question is, how do we navigate it? Things are changing, times are moving on, and it's not waiting for anybody. Today's generation wasn't the generation of yesterday, and tomorrow's generation will have different mindset and ways of doing things. But it's important that it doesn't matter your mindset. It's important that when you want to talk about culture and tradition, there are people who are there who are, in quote, traditionalists that you cannot wave away, by just wishful thinking. And these are the people that will come around and want to take the front seat, when critical issues of asset sharing within the family happens, whether it is family business or it is, in terms of investment, or real estate or something, land or something. that is left behind. So yes, for me, these things come to play. The only problem is that we as individuals who are living, often downplay them. So yes, thank you, Mercy, for bringing up this webinar. I believe it's going to be impactful. We're going to share a lot of insights. It's going to open up a lot of questions that some of us or some of you have not really considered in your entrepreneurial journey. So I want to leave it here and hand over to you, Mercy. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we've had two key things that we've brought to the fore. From Mary speaking about the fact that these things are real. And no matter how best intentioned you are, some people would direct you to where you are coming from. They will tell you to go back to your roots or understand how it was done or how they've been doing it, how culture, how tradition has been, even before you as the patriarch or the matriarch were born. And Dr. Nkem has also mentioned a very critical, important fact that more often than not, the people concerned, the wealth creators who are seeking to transfer this wealth, they get to this point late. So it's not like from the outset, you are you have that understanding and you are actively working around how do I deal this? How do I bring as much people into my circle and make them understand what my wishes are? And make them understand that this is the blueprint and this is the big picture. More often than not, it's super late in the day, and it will almost amount to little that you can do about nothing. So these are critical conversations that we need to have. And like I've always said, more often than not, you meet clients that just make your work beautiful. Then you also meet the challenging ones. The challenging ones are the ones that really make you think through the entire process and they challenge you. And just recently, this has become an issue that we've had to work around, and just to ensure that there is family harmony and the well-being of the family is prioritized, and what is fair and what is equitable is brought to the fore. So I'm going to ask again, Mary, do you think that within our traditional, I'm just trying to say, where do we lay this blame on, if there's anything like laying a blame on? Are we going to say that it's because we've had religious or other foreign influences that have come in to kind of changed our ways? And would you say that those influences, whether they are foreign influences or they are colonial influences, whether those influences are good or whether they are bad? And if they are, should we throw everything away? Like they say, you don't throw the bath water with the baby away because the water is dirty. So are there things that, given the influences, because we are all Africans and we have rich cultural heritage. So you find out that the influences that we are having now as regards a lot of generational work planning is coming from both foreign religious influences and also post-colonial influences. So how do we merge this?
It's a loaded question. All right, so do I think that we have external influences? Certainly. I think we've all been socialized to, in my upbringing, I grew up, I go to church, there are all these things. I never lived back then, pre-colonial era where things were done a certain way. So the world as we know it has changed. And I think the easy word would be to adapt, because yes, there's been influence. If you talk of the effects of colonialism on us, when you go to the courts, what's the thing that you see? I still don't understand why our lawyers wear those wigs, because it's not us. It's not a part of our culture, right? But yeah, we've been colonized and we've picked on some of these things. But outside of the wig, which is just an external thing, I feel that introduction of the legal system, the introduction of all these legal frameworks, we never had that back then, right? It was more of the traditional way of doing things. Now we insist on, let's say, writing, documenting everything, having wills. I think before it was more of oral communication, just say what you want to do and your elders will be there to implement it, things like that. So a lot has changed between, post-colonial era, right? The legal system is there to ensure that the right things are done. You have education, so now people know their rights, people know what they're about. I'm not waiting for my uncle in the village to tell me that this is how we do things. No, I am more enlightened. So on the colonial side, I think we can say that the introduction of the legal system, even land registration, I think before it was more of, this is the land, it belongs to the Tabis, it belongs to the Asante somewhere. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Now, if you don't have that land certificate, if you don't have those things, there's that tension between the legal way where they recognize your document versus that communal way of doing things before, which is a thing of the past. So there's certain influences that we've had from the colonial side. Let's also come to even religion, right? Before, you're talking polygamous, I think with the traditional, you have the polygamous marriages. If you're a Christian, one woman and that's it, right? So there's certain influences. We've been influenced in many ways. Reinforcement of the gender bias. I mean, when it comes to how things are done now, we're pushing for gender equality, whereas back then women did not have access to some of these things. Women can't inherit property. There's so much that has changed, and it's okay to say the world has evolved. It's okay to say that this is how, these are my beliefs now. I think once you acknowledge that, it's also important to acknowledge that just because your mindset has shifted doesn't mean that everybody in your family thinks the same way. So stakeholder management is key. Now, you asked a question about should we throw everything away? I can't ask that things be thrown away, and there are certain good aspects of it, but I think the key thing for any business leader or owner is the fact that whatever your belief is, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your assets by putting in the necessary measures to ensure that you get your way, to ensure that things are done the way you want. How can you do that? Be very intentional with documentation. Have a will in place, make sure that you understand where you're coming from. So you know that stubborn uncle who will come and torment your family if you don't manage them. Will you sort them out before you're gone? Maybe you should. Maybe you should educate some of these people. Like, you have to be intentional and drive things a certain way, whether or not your whole family has changed and sees or accepts these beliefs. That's a different matter. I don't think we can change certain people and how they think. It's okay. That's their way of thinking. But let me protect myself by ensuring that I put in the necessary measures to protect myself, to protect my wealth, to protect my family. I think that's what it is. Just recognizing that possibly I've been influenced, I think, a certain way, but with this mindset, I'm being intentional and I want to make sure that I'm putting in the things. I think with Islam, for instance, the male inherits, I think the female inherits half of whatever the male gets or something like that. Like, these are things that maybe somebody currently would not want to do or implement in their will. So make sure you write those things so that you have your way, as opposed to leaving it to chance and creating inconveniences for everyone. So acknowledge that there are differences, acknowledge that true, we've been influenced by different factors, but that's the world we live in now, and put in the necessary measures to have peace of mind. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. We cannot overemphasize the need for stakeholder management, because as becomes real is that these things happen when the patriarch or the matriarch or the wealth creator, as the one that has the assets, is no longer with us. That's it. So it's not a case of, oh, he's still alive and people are quote and unquote misbehaving. It's a case of he's 6 feet under the ground. So a lot of people can decide to come up and do what they want. So stakeholder management is very key when you are alive, and being intentional is also intentional about your objective, how you want to foster harmony, how you want to foster equity, how you want to foster fairness within your family makeup, so that you don't leave assets and what you now bequeath is not really assets, but actually conflict and all manner of negativity in the family. So, Dr. Nkem, we're going to ask you, what role do extended families member play within the succession process for African families? And how does the role that they play, how does it impact assets distribution or not distributing anything at all?
Thanks for asking, Mercy. Extended family relationship, when it with regards to wealth sharing or asset distribution. Here's the thing. Within when Mary was answering her question, a lot of thoughts came to mind regarding not just the statutory laws, but looking at customary and religion, and then bringing it to the communal thing, which is where the issue of extended family or relations come in. Now, again, I want to start by saying that you don't really consider all of these things until they happen. And now that we are aware of them, it's critically important for us to guide ourselves. And how do we do that? Through planning, and we're going to get to that. Now, what are the impacts of those relationships that we have? Growing up, we probably knew about our siblings, depending on where you're coming from. Looking at me and the Southeastern people, the core Igbo people, I'm aware about my siblings, and I know the extended family relations that we call cousins, right? Maybe from the lineage of grandfather, great-grandfather. And I can assure you that they actually don't, because we don't have family trees. I don't know if you do, but we don't have family trees. So if you want to ask me to be honest to you, the relationship, the line, I probably don't know. But something happened. I mean, typical of what happened to me. And I'm talking about, it has much to do with this extended family thing. When my dad lived, based on the date he shared with me and my siblings, he lived for 104 years. Some people said he lived more than that.
Wow.
Yes, so when up to the age, that certain age, I can't remember, I just grew up to see that there was this farmland where we were farming. We farmed it. While my father was alive, my mother was alive, we all farmed there. So to me, we were the owners of that land. And before my dad passed, he told me about certain portion of land that are ours. And one that he pledged to, all of those things that happen in the village. And so he never said he owed anybody or that any of the land that we farm belonged to anybody. And I took him by his word. I can, pledge on that. So, but less than a year after my dad passed, then I got a call that this portion of land in this particular place had been farmed on. And that is your dad's piece of land. And I said, wow, who is doing that? And they said, somebody, within the family who is a cousin. And so I was like, oh gosh, why should I start this land tussle and in my village? And I'm not present in the village, right? So And so wisdom came, people say, do you like your life and all of those things? And so I chose the path of peace, which is not usual for many people. And I forfeited that land till tomorrow. And he never spoke to me about it. But some people went and asked him about the ownership of the land. He said, yeah, truly he was the owner, but he gave it to my dad because he liked what my dad did for him. And so he appreciated him with that. But that right now, my dad is no more and he had to collect it back. And so the question is, how wish my dad in the years that he lived sat under this type of webinar to learn that he has a right to protect whatever that belongs to him. I probably would not have lost that particular piece of land. So coming back to that question, extended family influence, yes, that influence is there. It can be positive, it can also be negative. Positive in the sense that, yes, they can actually enforce unity within the family cycle when they want to, and negative in the sense that there are certain steps you may want to take, and I will tell you this. Assuming there is a property or an investment that the eldest son wants to dispose, and he says, I am, because we are doing this patrilineal tradition where the eldest, gets the largest, including the Obi or even the shrine of the late father, right? He gets those. That's tradition. Now, assuming he wants to sell that Obi or what belongs to his great-grandfather, being the first son, it is possible for the other cousins to believe that, to rise and say, no, you can't do that because this is a communal asset. You need to consult us for you to do. In fact, it happened in my family as well. This happened to a cousin. His dad is late. He sold a portion of their land without consulting his siblings. He is the first, but the siblings rose. He had got the payment and used the money, but his siblings rose and said, you cannot, as a matter of fact, sell this portion of land. Go and return the money to whoever the buyer, right? And they stood by it. So what are the influences? Yes, the influences are there, but the truth is that we need to be aware of them so that we guard ourselves, like Mercy said, because we may not be there when all of these conflicts would arise. And what is the way forward? Just adding a voice to Mary. It's important we set up a trust where we live. And maybe for family businesses, set up a governance structure where we appoint individuals. You may be the eldest, okay, you be the CEO. The other one, maybe you be the COO or the CFO. And so everybody understands their roles. And we train them, to be able to lead this organization so that when anything happens, we are not going to be running into that conflict of influence, negative influence from from our cousins and the people around us. Thank you so much, Mercy.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is just very, very enlightening and enriching. So, in essence, this is the reality. And more often, when you get to hear this story, I heard a story yesterday, and I was like, "You mean it?" And it was like, "Yes, it happened to me." So this just like a story like yours, but this one was just the fact that they couldn't locate the will of the father. For one reason or the other, the will was there. The lawyer was not available. Something very funny. Until tomorrow, the eldest child just said, you know what, everything that dad has is mine, to the extent that one of the children had relocated from the UK to Nigeria, but couldn't even stay. There was no house for them to stay because the house had been assumed by the eldest child. And that has led to conflicts between the eldest child and his other sibling, who also happens to be male, happens to also be the male child. So these things are real. And how we manage them as the children come into adulthood, come into asset ownership, come into their own, is very, very important. And just trying to minimize the influence that outsiders would have that would negatively impact them also, that would just add to disharmony and conflict in the family, is very, very important. So just as Dr. Okem had said, it is absolutely very important that we have this information, we know this, and we start working, we start thinking about the solutions that would work. There's no one size fits all, but the peculiarities of your family, the peculiarities of the assets that you hold, and the peculiarities of your circumstances will determine how you want to go about managing and preserving those assets and the legacy that you would have worked so hard for. Okay, so we are going to look at the role of traditional and native laws in succession and wealth transfer. And we would say, I'll go back to Mary. How do you think the high net worth families should navigate legal pluralism? I know you've touched on it a bit, but where we have customary, religious, and statutory laws, where they have to coexist. Sometimes they don't coexist at all. How do you think that how should wealthy African families plan when you have this pluralism of religion, cultural, and also legal system? What would be the blueprints that you would want to set, that you would want to advise wealthy African families to go about managing their estate planning and generational wealth planning?
Okay, so I'm not sure there's a one size fits all, but I think it's important to first of all know where you're coming from and understand the things that will probably hinder your distribution of wealth, etc. So to start with, so in Ghana, for instance, I mean, if you're talking about me, my father is on the Akan side. The Akans are matrilineal. So when you go to that side, they tell you inherit from your mother's side. So then I'm not accepted on my dad's side. I need to come to my mom's side. On my mom's side, they are patrilineal. So on that side, they kick me back. I don't belong anywhere. So, people like me, we just have to go with the law. But it's these gaps, But yes, so on the patrilineal side, I mean, they limit access to family wealth. It goes to the men, right? And then when you go to the matrilineal side, you inherit from your mother's lineage. And even with that, it's the males in that side that have the decision-making authority and all of that. So first of all, you need to understand the systems that you belong to, what the challenges could be and all. Now, how should high net worth families navigate this whole system of, the customary, the religious, and the statutory? That's a lot of work. But
yeah,
I think if I have to do this, the most important thing I'll say is to work with professionals. You're asking me for a blueprint. I think for every person, you may say that it's expensive working with, professionals. But the truth is, you need that comprehensive legal assessment. You need to understand the gaps if you take this route versus this route. You need to ensure that you've done that assessment, and you cannot do it. We are not experts. We only know so much as individuals. There are people that have been trained to do this. And so it's important that you invest in that and get, you know, professionals to work with as you plan your estates, like in terms of estate planning, because you don't want to do everything right, have a will, say you've done it all, and then, oh, there's this fine line that you fail to include, and so it's null and void, right? So comprehensive legal assessment, work with professionals to ensure that whatever estate plan you have complies with all the laws and practices from each side, right? I think that's the first thing. The second will be cultural sensitivity. So recognize the traditional practices, understand, I mean, I think for us, the Ashantis, for instance, when a man dies, I mean, it's your nephew that takes everything. It's not even your son. You people are talking about firstborn child. No. In certain traditions, it's the nephews that outside of your own family. And
outside of your immediate
yes,
family.
it can't happen, people of God. We need to make sure that you can't change where you come from. I want to believe that there are positives in all these things. There's a reason why things were done a certain way. But I keep saying that we are not in that same era. Things have changed. Yes, you could pick the positives, but whatever it is, appreciate the culture, but recognize it and ensure that whatever you put in place reflects your family values, right? And also there's the religious considerations. I mean, in Ghana, if you marry under customary, like if you don't have the proper legal wedding, I think children from such are not recognized if they are splitting property, for instance. So you have to make sure that you cover all grounds and protect your family. I think for any leader, what is the intention? Really, one way is to just decide, listen, I don't care what happens to my money. If I'm dead and gone, leave me, let me rest in peace. For a responsible family business leader, I want to believe that you're creating something that you want to last for generations. You're building wealth that you want to, take care of future generations. And so to do that, you owe it to yourself to make sure that you have the right governance system in place. You have these things in place, understand and appreciate that there's the statutory, there's customary, like you have these traditions that you can't ignore, and have that tight document that ensures there are no loopholes whatsoever and your wealth is protected. On the religious side, understand your beliefs and how they intersect with legal frameworks, right? So if you don't have a will and the law takes over, whatever they implement, is that what you really want? If that's not what you want, then make sure that you recognize it. Or maybe they only recognize one wife, but you know that by your religious moves, you can have 3 or 4. Well, then protect those 3 or 4. If the law takes over, we're taking care of that one who signed documents and is accepted or seen as the legal wife. So appreciate what the traditional things are, appreciate the religious considerations, but work with professionals to ensure that you have covered, you have an estate plan that complies with all these different factors, or you leave loopholes that could still be used against you. So be intentional. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah. You cannot overstate it. Be intentional. And that's that has become a recurring theme. Appreciate that we are Africans, appreciate our deeply rooted cultural heritage, appreciate our native laws and customs, but be intentional about how you manage and navigate them. There is a need for us to be culturally sensitive, especially when we have significant assets. Now, this is all about when you have assets. If you don't have anything, nobody is going to be coming to come and disturb you or disturb. But once you are identified as someone who has significant assets, who has worked hard, who has been blessed, then you know that it's almost near impossible, if you are not intentional about your inheritance planning and your estate planning, that something that you probably would not have wanted would materialize. So cultural sensitivity is key, no matter how much we go with our belief in God and the Almighty God as Christians, or even not as Christians. I must say this, though, that when you made the comment about working with professionals, that is absolutely very important. A lot of Africans downplay this because we just don't have it as part of our culture, the way we work, the way we want to execute our initiative and our plans. We always feel that we can do it ourselves. There is always this do it yourself mentality. And I don't know whether it's an African thing, but you always have it. You always would look at the fact that, why should I pay someone, or why should I seek good counsel when I can as well sit down and do it myself? More often than not, that just leads to more chaos. Now, when we are talking about religious, I just wanted to mention again that testamentary freedom for people that have assets is not blanket. So if you look at some of the Wills Law or the Wills Act, they actually take cognizance of customary law. So if you go and you say, oh, I've done my will, anything can happen. Like I just told the story about the will that got missing. It can get missing. You cannot, and we run very wonderful systems as Africans and even as Nigerians here, where things can get missing. A house can get burnt. Where it was kept can get burnt. You will not see anything. Everybody is back to, okay, square zero. How do we start? So you're understanding these things and planning for them and be intentional about them and wanting to avoid the fact that you worked hard for your assets, you were successful, and immediately you pass on. The ones that you leave behind probably just have no basis. They don't have that strong foundational basis to carry on the wealth. It now becomes shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve. So you go shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve. In 3 generations, you are back to hustling. You are back to working hard. And that's not the story. I always tell this to my professional colleagues. You go for these family business, family wealth advisory conferences, estate planning conferences, and you hear people telling you, oh, I'm a 15th generational family member. I'm 25th generation. I'm 7th generation. And I keep asking myself, where will Africa get to even the 5th generation, the 7th generation? When are we going to start having clients that their assets and their wealth has lived on for generations, 100 years and counting, and those assets are still there? The family is still thriving off the assets that came from that matriarch or patriarch, setting the pace, setting the tone for others to follow. And it's not a case of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves before you know it. So thank you very much for that, Mary. Dr. Nkem, I'm going to ask you now, how do you advise families dealing with multiple heirs? So let's say that you went and you have the one wife, but customary law, or it can even be other laws, allows you to take on an extra one and all that. How do you, and you now have people that will contest for your assets in those kind of situations where you have multiple heirs? How do you manage conflicting interests like that when it comes to the family wealth or the family business?
Thank you so much again, Mercy. Wow, it can be confusing if you want to go alone, administering the wealth left behind, if you do not have an expert who is there to guide you. So if you are having multiple heirs, there's bound to be conflict. It really doesn't matter how, which Christian background or religious, let me use that, religious background you're coming from. Things do happen. You see, we keep talking about male-centric tradition where there are men, but have we ever considered families where there are no men? You know, and what
True.
happens? What really happens when you have 5 young ladies who are well-to-do, but they don't have a brother, right? Okay, so where there are different heirs, for example, in a polygamous family, where every mother will want to protect the piece of the late or the gone father, it can be contextual. Also, where maybe if you're coming from my own part of the world, where it is a tradition to exclude even the mother. I don't want to use the word chest high way, as if she's not a human being, from the family, from her husband's place. So it becomes, again, an issue. But how do we manage, how do we navigate all of these, multiple hair thing? As a matter of fact, borrowing from 2 last speakers, Mary and Mercy, being intentional is the way to go. Number one, we need to plan ahead. Recognizing that if I'm wealthy today, if I have invested so much and I don't want to leave it for somebody, even a family member, even a child who happens to be the eldest, but is not well-to-do, but lacks leadership or lacks training or lacks respect, right? Once I know that that has happened within my family, I need to be intentionally aware and plan for it so that I protect the other ones or the interest of the other ones. If it is a business, I really have to be able to manage them, put them, I know a multi-billion naira wealthy industrialist in Nigeria operating in Lagos who trained his children abroad and keeps bringing them back into his business and giving them responsibilities. In fact, I like the guy. He didn't just pull them from after training and say, you work as this manager or this director. They start from the warehouse to understand, the nitty-gritty of the business and grow from there. So such is he's an intentional individual who want to pass on, kind of succession plan for those for his children. So it's, for me, number one, you really have to intentionally assign roles and responsibilities for the children. 2, it's also important to create where you live a kind of governance structure, within your family, so that everybody knows what they're working towards. All right. And of course, the place of the will cannot be overflowed or emphasized. Of course, you don't tell the children, I've got a will, and so you can, if you like, be good. If you don't like, no, they will kill you before you go. So before
absolutely, yeah.
So
that's the reality, yeah.
Yes. And somebody like Mercy, I'm not selling Mercy, but this is her business, this is what she does, is a good expert to consult and find out, maybe free advice, on what's the way forward for writing this will and protecting it, So yes, for me, where there are multiple heirs, it's important to plan ahead of time. Make them aware. In a football match of 11 players, a good coach or a good technical advisor will always tell his team that there is no automatic shit. So you work for it. Don't just believe that because I am the eldest son, let this man go and I get everything. No, be upfront with it. And also something that has happened and is happening in some Igbo lands or communities is the fact that even the man before he goes or the woman before she goes, anywhere, also include the female child in the will. It happens now, right? However, they don't give them significant part of the investment like land. They don't award land, because once they do that, the customary tradition, will kick against it. But of course, they give them properties. Of course, they can give them cash award, all of those things. And that is blending legislation, kind of statutory law, with the traditional customary law, Or some are even saying, you know what, let's go equally, which of course the traditional law is kicking against. They may resist it if you want to do that. So yes, being intentional is important. Being upfront and educating these people, letting them know that I worked for this, but you really have to prove that you are qualified to be a partaker in it. Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's just fantastic. So as you were speaking, two things came to my mind. We have to take cognizance that for the Muslims, when you mentioned all female inheritors or all female heir, what just came to my mind was the Islamic jurisprudence that kind of guides how their estate planning is done. So that's already contained in the Sharia, who gets what. So if it's all female, if it's male, there is that distribution that is so well delineated. It's well established, well spelled out. So you understand if you predecease your parents, if you predecease your mom, different things, and you have significant assets while you were alive and you are no longer there. So you have that Islamic estate planning that kind of just takes care of those kind of scenarios. And the scenarios, no matter how complex they could be, they've actually been well stated. So for those that are of the Islamic faith, there is nothing to fear. If you do want to share your asset, that's already stated. But there is a portion that you can give that is subject to your own discretion as against what you have in the Quran. And like I said, these things are real. So no matter how good intentioned you are, if you are of the Islamic faith, there is already, and you practiced it. So it's not just saying by name, oh, I'm just by name, but you've lived your life and you've practiced it. You've practiced that faith. Then you do have to know that your asset cannot just go to about anybody. You would have to have those limitations to what you can give out to those that are probably not from your family, or they are not already identified. The same way too with customary law as well. If it's the house that is in the village, if it's the father's first house building and all that, just like Dr. Okem had said, you can look at other things that you can bequeath that would, to an extent, ensure that the harmony in the family stays when you are not there. And you could look at other assets and try to bring, but just be intentional. Try to have your stakeholder management process, both within your family and also externally, well sorted out. Just to speak again to the need for professionals. As Dr. Nkem mentioned, we actually have a campaign that we are running, and I will speak more about it just before we close this webinar, where you could actually come in and have conversations with our wealth advisors for free. So it's a 45 minutes free session. Whatever your concerns are, you can speak to our wealth advisors about it, and we would be able to we'll be able to understand more about what your concerns or what the peculiarities that you have are. So we have the QR code there. You can scan it, but I will speak to it more. So back to our panelists. Mary, I'm going to ask you the role of women, women's impact. For a lot of time, you find out that women's role are not amplified, they are not elevated, especially within, for people that claim to be traditionalists, people that claim to be, I mean, from the roots, a woman's role. Some people would, I mean, you would just hear all kinds of things about where a woman should be and where a woman should be found and where a woman should not be found. So within the traditional African inheritance systems, as they impact a woman's ability to inherit and control families' wealth, how do we, I know we've talked about them, I mean, a bit, but how do we in 2025 and going forward elevate the status of women and all the things that a woman brings to the table? A woman is a custodian. She will be I mean, there's a lot of virtues that come with a woman leading the family or being an inheritor and passing on that legacy. So how can women or female children play more role, or how can the patriarch or the matriarch be intentional about how they elevate their female heirs?
All right, so it's interesting that
because we don't want the women to be treated as furniture. So they just when they are packing all the things that they have distributed, they distribute the women as well as furniture. So how do we manage that?
All right, it's interesting that you say in the traditional areas, you know, the women's role is not amplified, because you and I know that even in modern settings, yes, we've made progress, but there are still some people who feel women don't belong in certain spaces and all. So it's a mindset. It'll take a while to get people to change. But certainly, I agree with you. I mean, thinking about Ghana, for the patrilineal side, for instance, where inheritance passes down through the male line, I know one of the reasons, or one of the things they say, is that the women will marry into other families, right? So why should we pass down property? Why should we give inheritance to them when they're going to go to a different family? So that's one of the reasons why you keep it in the family, by keeping it to the men, so that it stays within the family. Remember, we talked about the traditional system where they think of communal, everything is ours, it stays within our families for us. So that mindset is there. Now, even on the matrilineal side, inheritance passes through the female, right? Mother to daughter. But even then, women are supposedly provided with more control, but it's the uncles, it's the woman's brother that would usually have control, or sometimes have that significant decision-making power. So the traditional setting was just special. Now, thank God, I think there are reforms that have really helped with this. And that's for starters, right? How do you protect the woman, even before we come to, you know, fair inclusion and all? The first step is there a legal system that is backing these women up or supporting them, so that if your husband should pass, knock on wood, you're not left hanging with nothing, all of that, right? And I think in Ghana, we have to commend them we have the PNDC law 111, PNDC law 111, which protects the wife. I mean, it doesn't matter what system you belong to. If someone should die without a will, this only happens when they don't have a will. But if you should die without a will, then the system kicks in where they protect widows and children, so that there's a percentage that goes to the surviving spouse. There's a percentage usually about 60+% that goes to the children. And then the nice thing is we are supporting, we understand the customary things, we understand their traditions. So there's a percentage that goes to your successor from the customary side. So if let's say we're doing the patrilineal and you know it's supposed to go to the first meal or whatever, then that person gets that percentage that is allowed for the customary successor. So that's really good. There's a legal system supporting you. Now, outside of that as well, I mean, I think this helps so that you're not left out when it comes to the property. But outside of that, how can families ensure, you know, fair inclusion of female heirs without, you know, all these issues? I think education is key. See where you can adapt, understand traditional values, but also educate your people on what is key, what, you know, some enlightenment is needed. When we get some of these things, we shouldn't keep it to ourselves. You know that the people around you will influence outcomes. So make sure that you pass on information, educate people. It's like how you go for trainings as a manager or, you know, as a business leader, but it's just you always going. You're changing, you're enlightening yourself, you're changing your mindset, but your team is still your team. They have that tunnel vision. Yeah. So it's the same way when you get staff, pass it down, engage stakeholders, things like that. Then it's also important. I think we don't like having difficult conversations in Africa. We don't like it. And in family businesses, that's one of the key things. But have those open, honest conversations with family, right? Help them to understand, include your leaders, include that uncle. Well, we're all having some party, you know, like, but you bring in conversations that, have you seen how women are rising? Have you, like, give examples, let people understand that, hey, women are making a difference in the world now. Like, you need to get them to understand and appreciate the things that you can see and appreciate. I think that's a big mistake that we just keep saying, oh, they're traditional, they don't understand things, and you leave them there, but they will mess you up. So carry them along and help them to see things the way you do. The perspective matters, that change in mindset matters. And it's important to highlight the benefits of inclusion. What do they say? I mean, women are nurturers. If you put a woman in your business, if you put a woman to manage your wealth, you know that will multiply it. We, you know, we have to hype ourselves. They should hype us. We have the skills, we have the strength, we're resilient. Like, let people understand, hype your ladies. And then that way, if people understand that putting this person in this place is to protect something that belongs to all of us and our future generations, they see things differently. And I think in all this, it's important to understand it's stewardship. I think, especially with family businesses, if you think, oh, I'm just here to take all and chop, then your approach is different. If you understand that we're building wealth that will pass on to future generations, it's not just about us, it is about my children's children's children, then you're more open to who is the right person to manage that. And if they say the woman is the one, the woman has the skills, at a particular time, the woman can contribute and make things better, certainly you go with it, unless you're very stubborn. But yeah, I think it's important to educate, have those open conversations, and just highlight the benefits that women bring to leadership, what's being done, show people the way, and hopefully it'll change their minds and it'll help. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, like, just talking about inclusion, it should be like a no-brainer in 2025, but what do we know? We had Donald Trump coming and the DEI is dead. So I think it's everybody's to your tent now, but the bottom line is something needs to change, something needs to give within the Africa generational wealth, especially for wealthy Africans. Something just has to change. We need to be able to speak our stories of 5th generation, 10th generation. We have not even left we haven't left 1st generation, 2nd generation. So we need to start building legacies. And if that means that we will become more open and inclusive, and bring in the women and put in whatever structures are in place, let's think about the big picture. Let's not go in with shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves. Let's stop all this. If you have been blessed, there is absolutely no reason why those coming after you, those that are your blood, those that are associated with you, should exist in penury and exist in story, in like I would say, tales by moonlight, where they are hearing glorious stories about your endeavors, about your meeting the prime minister, your meeting you were the first person that was able to have a private jet, or you were the first person in your village that did one thing or the other. And those are just tales by moonlight. People look at, oh, who is that person now? Where is the family members? And you just look at them and you're like, oh my God, I don't think I want to be like this. So let's change that story. And we can, as Africans, change that story if we are intentional and we are more inclusive in how we are more inclusive in how we go about it. Okay, so Dr. Nkem, I'm going to ask you, I'm still speaking about the role that women play. How can, what advice would you give to women in wealthy families who wish to play a more active role in wealth management and succession planning, who wish to just play a significant, they don't want to let it slide because they are more invested in the legacy of the patriarch or the matriarch, and they would have a ton of obstacles on their way. What advice would you give to such Amazons when you have them in your family?
Thank you so much, Mercy. Mary just said it, that if you give a woman a business to manage, she doesn't just manage it, she multiplies it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I believe that also. Some women, and you call them Amazons, right?
Yeah.
All right, so for me, it's difficult to give what you don't have in any situation. And so if you're a woman, you're fortunate to be within this bracket that we are discussing. It's important for you to educate yourself. Go out of your way and educate yourself. And what do I mean? I'm not saying you should go back to a business school. You need to really understand the intricacies of family business, what setting up trusts entail, what executing wills entail, what the statutory pronouncement or provisions rather about will right, and I guess it's the 1837 Act or so.
Yeah, that's the Wills Act, yeah.
Good. So what the provision says, and so you can act yourself and begin to prepare yourself, because you can't just start talking about wills execution, succession planning, and estate management, or transfer of asset, when you don't have clues about all of these things. So for me, the first is, please humble yourself enough and understand what they entail. And you can actually align yourself with some NGOs. There are a couple of NGOs. If you go to Mr. Google, or now that we have AI, to ask questions about those NGOs that are related to all of these, you can actually get more information. But don't bother to go too far. Again, there are experts who have knowledge about all of this, who have made this type of administration their business. And you can consult with them, to learn about this, so that you prepare yourself ahead of the time rather, because it will surely come. The only issue is that we don't know when they will happen. All right. So yes, align yourself with NGOs, align yourself with experts, and please learn to understand. Attend workshops. There are a couple of workshops here and there, about all of this. I guess even the host of this event probably have one or knows about one or two workshops about this, where you can enrich yourself with knowledge about all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it just goes back to it. Education, you cannot give what you don't have, certainly. That is time tried, tested. You cannot give what you don't have. It's what you have that you can give that you would be able to build on. So getting the right education, working with the experts, and just being inquisitive and preparing yourself, because those challenges will come, those obstacles will come. But how do you navigate it, especially when you are invested as a woman in the legacy of your family, whether the family wealth or the family business? I mean, you just put yourself in a position where you cannot be ignored. And I mean, this is 2025. Even if we are living in Trump's 2025, with a lot of the clawbacks that are coming on, but at the same time, the world is not waiting. The world is opening up. Opportunities are there. And so let's just keep making sure that we are ahead of the curve, especially when we are concerned about generational wealth planning, either from the patriarch's perspective, or even as an inheritor. As an inheritor, I want to ensure that my family's legacy actually lives beyond me, lives beyond my children, and it becomes a tale about generational wealth that other families would look up to. So we're going to have the final set of questions, and we'll be looking at stewardship of wealth. I know that in our conversation so far, we have identified that there would be external influences, no matter how much we want to prepare our immediate family. There will be extended family external influences. There will be influences that there will be those that we can control and those that we cannot control. Now, within the realm of those that we can control is the issue of stewardship of wealth, where we have inheritors who are not only concerned about consumption, but are more concerned about productivity. They want to be productive. They want to emulate the entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial drive of their father and their mother, the resilience, that acumen that they've held on to, those values they've held on to. So what would be the pathway that we can speak to as mothers and fathers, to entrepreneurs, whether you are a family business owner, whether you are a CEO, whether you are a techpreneur, for just about anyone that has significant assets and is concerned about passing those assets on. And not just only about passing those assets on, it's also concerned about the legacy that he or she would want that should outlive them. So how do they start this conversation? How do they start building stewardship? Because we know that the inheritors would once be children, they would once be infants, they would become they would grow from infancy into young adults before they become adults. So how do you start, for within your realm of control, as a father, as a mother, as someone with significant assets, how do you begin to influence those that would inherit from you to be stewards of your wealth and not just coming to consume the wealth? Mary, I mean, if you would want to speak to this first before we go to Dr. Nkem.
Okay, I like the word stewardship. I like the word stewardship, you know. I think that sets things rolling, because the approach, the mindset that people have for receiving or inheriting something matters, right? And in the case of stewardship, it's like an occupy till I come thing, where you have the asset, but you're taking care of it, not just to spend, not just to do everything for yourself for now, but to ensure that we're leaving it for future generations as well. And thinking of all this, I like to think of it as future-proofing your your business or, your wealth for generations to come. How can you do that? I mean, I was just amazed to know that the oldest family business is in its 46th generation. 46.
Mm-hmm.
Like my mind, I tried to count it and yeah, it's not working. I couldn't even figure it out. But when you look at the stats, I mean, when you talk of succession from first gen to second gen, global stats, it's just about 30% success rate. I think so much, 70% of the wealth is lost in that first transfer. Now, when you come to the African setting, I think we're in single digits. So we'll not talk about town. Let's go with we'll go with the global stats. But so if we want to do this, I feel that as Africans, it's our time to change this narrative. We should be able to have businesses that when we're in heaven, we can see for this generation, wow, we put the foundations in place. But what are those things that we can do to ensure that that happens, to ensure that we have businesses that outlive us, that the wealth is being protected, all of that. I keep everything I do always goes back to the mindset. You have to get people to see or understand things from where you're coming from. Now, as the founder, you would have started the business. There's a shared vision. There's a purpose. There's a reason why you did this. There's a reason why you have your wealth. Okay, I'm preserving my wealth. I want to make impact. I'm just a kingdom financier. I use my money for good. There is a purpose, and you need to ensure that you carry your people along to understand what that thing is. I joined our family business. I'm working with my dad. I've worked with him since 2008. See, I understand the core and the reason why he started his business. I understand where he's trying to go with it. And he's instilled it so deep in here that if he's not around, I still hear that voice in my head, right? So ensuring that you have that shared purpose, ensuring that people buy into the vision is key. You won't be spending everything in the coffers if you know that the goal of my family is to make a difference and ensure that this community is transformed. You won't do that because in your heart there's something that's speaking to you. So ensure that there's that shared vision. Now, it's important. Nobody should be above the law. So as you're protecting that wealth, you need to make sure you have the systems and structures in place. It's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't trust you. But there should be systems in place. There should be checks and balance. And so that's where you have clearly defined roles and responsibilities. But there are those checks. I think in the family business setting, you have the constitution, you have, the family council, that's it. You have different ways to ensure that no one person is siphoning stuff, right? But all those things are important because we're working towards something, we're protecting the wealth that we have. So we're talking system structures, ensuring also that you put in the right people, competency over family ties. For instance, what is it that we are trying to achieve? Me, I want a business that is doing well. I want to keep the wealth. I want to maintain it. I want to grow it. And so if I know I'm not qualified to sit as the, what's the example? I can't even think of the role, but if I know that I'm not qualified, I won't push to be in there because I'm a family member or because I'm the firstborn. No, if this person qualifies, let's get them there because it's the outcome. You're thinking of, we are here to manage wealth for our future generations. What are the things we need to do? It's not about, it doesn't revolve around you, right? So I think that's very important. That shared purpose of vision, having the right governance system in place, having those structures in place, and conflict management resolutions. Understand that these things can happen, but you need to make sure that you have systems in place to manage that. And of course, whilst you're here, lead by example, do the right thing so your children will learn from it and understand that a daddy doesn't just go around throwing money away. So you train them with how you do things as well. And all these things, every day and every activity that you do really helps you to achieve this goal. So it's the lifestyle, it's your family values, all those things matter. And I think, especially with the next gens, early involvement is key. You wouldn't want to not get your children involved and then wait till you're 85 and you're like, you know what, just come and take over. No, they will just come and squander and go. But if you involve them over time, I mean, Dr. Nkem talked about a colleague whose children come around and all, like involve them, let them have skin in the game, and it helps over time. So it's just a lot to do, but I feel like the important thing is to just start. Don't wait till it's too late. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the recurring themes that we've had, it's about being intentional, is about making it a lifestyle. If we want our children to step into our shoes, no matter how big they are, they have to see us in those shoes. We have to impact those values. I kind of like to say this, that politicians in Africa has made productivity, like enterprise, they have made it not to have as much relevance as it should, especially African politicians. But that said, it's not always going to be like this, where you have the political class actually just grabbing and taking everything from themselves. It might look like it would be like this for a while, but it would not. Over time, the people would take over and they would extol productivity, because that is the only way they can survive. That is the only way they can know that their futures are secured, when they are productive, when there is enterprise. So while it might look like, oh, why do we have to be productive when we can just go and join one political party and we'll start awarding contracts and we start getting our either allowances, bloated allowances or kickbacks or whatever. That might seem like, yeah, it is what it is right now, but productivity is only how African can actually excel and also ensure that future generations have of Africans are taken care of. So productivity, enterprise, entrepreneurial initiative is a must. So we shouldn't get discouraged as matriarch or patriarchs, as family owners, as family business owners, as entrepreneurs. We shouldn't get discouraged with what it might look like right now. Enterprise would always win over time. People would need to have where they can sleep, what they can eat, basic amenities that they can live on. So whatever enterprise you are in as a family business owner, as an entrepreneur, you keep at it, because over time it would win over whatever quick get rich quick schemes or other models that are there. So when we are speaking about that, it's very important that the ones that are with us, that are the children, that are the inheritors, they see us live by those values, because that is the heritage they would inherit from us. So stewardship is all about what we want them to live by, the values we want them to live by when we are no longer here, and when they have those significant assets to manage. They are managing it from an entrepreneurial and a productive mindset. So Dr. Okay, I'm going to come to you now, and to ask you that what are the risks of not educating your heirs? Or let me ask, what are the risks of not living by example, by the values that you have lived? What are the risks of your children not seeing you live by those examples when it comes to stewardship of wealth and generational wealth planning, for anyone that is listening today?
Thank you so much, Mercy. So not living your values or not living by example is the same as, to me, not being able to lead good stewardship. Now, I have values and I sing about them and I don't live them, then I'm not setting the right path for the people that are looking up to me. If I'm in an organization and I'm a leader I always communicate values and values and values, and I'm not living them. I'm not an example of them, a living example of those values. Number one, I'm not a good steward. Two, I'm not a good leader. I won't be taken seriously. And so, if I'm a patriarch and I've got a vision which I've shared, and I want my constituents to go along the same path to achieve that vision or reach that vision with me, I must be a model of that value that is going to take us to that vision. I must, as a matter of fact, live it, demonstrate it. Should be a good example of whatever I preach. And it's not just about being a good example of whatever I preach. I should also institute or establish rewards for best performance or best practices or individuals who are, modeling me, because everybody looks up to me as the patriarch. However, if I'm not doing it, then I should not be bold enough to hold any one of them accountable for not leading that path. So it depends on us to be able to show good examples. But where this good example is absent, then we are building that organization to a downfall. There's this story about a wealthy Anambra businessman who lost something around 2 billion naira worth of business due to recklessness in management, of course, mismanagement. And that's because the individual that, the steward that this was handed over, squandered it. And why would that have happened? It's either what one of the things Mary said happened, because probably they brought them in late. Maybe when the man was close to where he was going.
Yeah, the departure lounge.
Absolutely, to get into management. And so he came with that type of, I'm only assuming, came with that entitlement attitude, it's my father's wealth, it's my mother's wealth, and then they squandered it. But if over time, again, being intentional, if over time we start communicating these values, driving this vision, holding them accountable, giving them responsibilities, rewarding them or punishing them for meeting the targets or not meeting the targets, as the case may be, I believe that they will turn out to be great people. But if you are not doing that, to be honest, it brings pain back to the patriarchs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So really, we've come to the end of this conversation. It's absolutely been fantastic. It's just been tremendously enriching, and I'm so happy that we had two wonderful speakers who not only have lived it, but also actually advocates for everything that has to do with the pride of generational wealth planning as an African. So they are invested in having generational wealth, building legacies, so that we ourselves, we can be looking at that 45th generation and we'll be pointing to an African family, an African entrepreneurial, an African enterprising family, to be that family that is in the 45th or 47th generation. So Mary and Dr. Nkem, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you, talking to you about wealthy African families and generational wealth, looking at all the intricacies when it comes to the influences that you have, whether it's from traditional laws, whether it's from religious, whether it's from not just having the right mindset of stewardship to kind of manage the wealth for other generations to be able to come into it as well. So if we do have concluding comments, this is the time. So I would now reverse it. I will ask Dr. Nkem to give us his concluding comments, then have Mary close us out.
Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. Concluding comments. For me, it's quite obvious that a time will come when we won't be available to administer all that we have acquired in life. And if we are lucky and blessed to have children, we need to plan so that we don't put them or leave them in crisis after we had gone. Even if not for them, but for our efforts, the legacies that we have built over the years wouldn't just do that. And if that be the case, it is important for each and every one of us, and even the people that are not here that we need to communicate to be able to learn more about wealth creation, about succession planning, about how to manage family businesses, and be able to get it right. And if we don't have the wherewithal, please consult an expert. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mary, over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, so I think my message is, you've built wealth. You have the wealth. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family, right? To put in the structures to ensure that this wealth is retained. You need to be very intentional. Recognize and appreciate the fact that there are different stakeholders, from the customary side, talking about the traditionalists, to statutory laws, to religious influences. Recognize all that. Find experts to hold your hands, right? And make sure that you create a stress-free, wahala-free estate plan that will help your family, right? And that will ensure that your wealth is not just squandered by the wrong people, but that it does what you set it out to do, right? So just be intentional. You want to make sure you can only make that change whilst you're alive. So be intentional, put in the structures, get the right people in, get help, get your children involved. If you have to, or whoever you choose your successor to be, get them involved early. But whatever that goal is, start working towards it now, and don't do it alone. Get experts to hold your hands to ensure that you can rest peacefully, and your family will also not be stressed on this side. So it's all up to you. Yes, you've built the wealth. That's the one side. Now put in the work to make sure that you sustain it and, keep it and grow it. So that's my thing. Be intentional. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. So for those of us who would want to see Mary, I'm sure, Mary, you're going to be at the African Family Business in Accra, right?
Yes, I will be there.
Okay, so fantastic. So you could make it a date with Mary there. She is a wonderful family business advisor, a practitioner, and also an advisor. And for those of us who want to keep in touch with Dr. Nkem, please, is very much available. You can reach out to them. You can reach out to him. He's one of the key members of the Business Network International, so you can always find him available to assist. You can always find him available to provide the necessary resources and know-how, and also join the BNI network as well, because that's where you have a collection of professionals and experts, just as we've been saying, that can help you in your journey of wealth creation, in your journey of wealth accumulation, in your journey of wealth preservation, in your journey of wealth transfer and transition. That said, thank you so much for everyone that has stayed with us this far. You don't know how much it gladdens our heart that you've been here with us, and you've made it so much worthwhile for us to keep going. Our webinars happen every 6 months, so twice in a year, where we look at salient issues that have impacted our businesses, impacted our clients, impacted our work, and we try to x-ray it and bring it out in the open for other families, for other individuals to benefit. It's all about having conversations that affect the day-to-day lives of affluent and high net worth individuals. Now, like I said earlier, with respect to our campaign, we have a campaign that is going on. We had put on the QR code initially, but we are putting on the QR code now. So please do join us in this campaign. What does wealth mean to you? We need to hear from you. A lot of people have different ideas of what wealth is. We want to be able to collapse it into things that resonate with us. So we believe that wealth is deeply personal and is just more than numbers. As fiduciary, as a business, that is our belief. Wealth is deeply personal and it is not only about numbers. It's about your freedom, your legacy, your security, and the ability of you to live your life on your terms and leave your family well off when you are not here. So what does wealth mean to you is a campaign that will help you to reflect on your unique vision of wealth and unlock the understanding to make it a reality. That is what we are all about. So we'll share the link. It's a campaign. Go to the link, go to the website, and when you do fill in your views about what wealth is, what resonates about for you when there's a conversation about wealth. We would thereafter schedule a free consultation, 45 minutes of time. You cannot get it anywhere else. The level of expertise that is in-house is tremendous. So you know that you are getting yourself the best of the deal. So let us know what wealth means to you, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. And also, for those of us that would be interested, we hope to see you in Accra, Ghana for the African Family Business, as well as also joining the Business Network International platform, where you would have access to experts just as myself, just as my team, to help you, whether it comes to your wealth planning, your wills drafting, your trusteeship, your offshore registration business, your citizenship and residency planning. Just about yesterday or today, Trump has announced a 5 million golden citizenship program. So speak with us if there are other programs that you would like, so that you'll be able to move your family visa-free to different destinations, have access to good education, have access to world-class medical facilities that are affordable, and also have a lifestyle that you can be proud of. So please do speak with us about our services and what we do. We are all over the social media, so you can again in July. Thank you so much.